Trade Radio is proudly supported by Host Plus, the official superannuation partner of the AFL. Having a top performer on your side, that's a plus.
This is general advice only. Consider the relevant Host Plus PDS available at hostplus.com.au before deciding if Host Plus is appropriate for you. For a description of the target market, please read the Target Market Determination, TMD, available at hostplus.com.au. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance.
A man who is definitely not on Tinder is my next guest, but he's been busy. Chris Davies is the GM of football. CD, I've got a bit of an issue. Someone set up a fake Tinder profile of myself, and I've had a bit of explaining to do as we welcome you in on that note.
A fake Tinder account, goodness me. No, never something that I've had a look at. But I understand that it's a good thing for the modern day player.
Yes, okay. I'm sure you've had a couple of players that may have been on Tinder and using some advice on how to tackle the new way of social media. Hey, CD, let's straighten up a little bit because you landed a player yesterday. Jeremy Finlayson, 3-year deal. You're going to give up, you gave up a future third-round pick. Can you explain how you think he helps Port Adelaide next year?
Well, it certainly help our depth from a forward line perspective. I mean, it's not very often that you're able to get a player in who's kicked 40-plus goals at AFL level in a season for obviously what we gave up. So from that perspective, depth at our club and competition for spots is a good thing. Obviously, Jeremy has the added ability to be able to go into the ruck and perform a role there for us as well. So, look, if nothing else, he goes into a mix of a forward line that, we've got Charlie who's obviously getting older. We've got a couple of younger, developing key forwards. I think that Jeremy can come in and certainly provide some real competition for spots up there.
Mm. Yeah, I wasn't sure at the start. I was like, he's not really a player that you need. Then you hear about Laddams and Dixon's age. I don't hate the deal, I've got to be honest, but it wasn't a pressing need. I thought that the discussions around the Giants seemed pretty smooth and they almost seemed happy to let him be a little bit closer to family in South Australia, CD.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness, our club and GWS, have a good relationship. Once we got to a point where I think there was agreement that GWS were going to let him explore his options, that things went pretty smoothly from there. We try and be a club that gets deals done, that doesn't hold players up unnecessarily. And I think in fairness, most clubs who deal with us think they get a reasonable outcome, as do we. There's no point going into a trade period wanting to win every deal. That's not the way that you get things done. It's certainly not the way that you maintain relationships across the competition. So we're happy to fight hard, but at the end of the day, you've got to get a win for all parties, including the player.
So that being said, I guess the discussion around Peter Laddams, I've heard two versions. I've heard your version that it was Pete that sort of put it on the agenda. I've heard other reports that it was the club that almost encouraged him to look around and explore perhaps some more opportunity. Is the truth somewhere in the middle?
I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle, isn't it, Kane? The reality of Pete's situation is that we don't think we can provide him right now the spot that he wants to specifically play in. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't think that Pete is a really good player and has an opportunity to continue to progress at our club. It's more about what we think both parties need right now. Suggesting that someone can explore their options and suggesting that someone should, they're two different things. And I hope that people can understand that. Allowing someone to actually explore doesn't necessarily mean that you've pushed them out the door. It certainly doesn't mean that you're committed to doing a deal down the track. If we were to get to a point where Pete decided that he wanted to go, then clearly the club is going to have to be able to get some compensation that is going to mean that we're happy to do the deal based on his current contractual status. Now, that will play out over the next week, clearly. But I don't think anyone needs to think that this isn't an amicable situation. We've got another player on our list who, is in the same sort of situation right now, who has played, and this is Sam Powell-Pepper, I'm sure you're going to talk about him, who, wants more midfield time. Now, we think that we've got some other players who we'd like to throw into that mix as well. So on the basis that Sam was out of our team at the end of the year, and that he played mostly as a forward this year, we've given him the opportunity to have that look as well. It doesn't mean that a deal's going to get done, but if it does, then at least we're all on the same page. And I think it's actually important that you leave your exit interviews with some clarity around the roles that you think players can play.
So do I. So that being said, and your opening remarks about Finlayson, and it's not always, fighting to get the best possible deal that you can. I find Peter Laddams hard to value. Now, clearly, you as a club, which is your right to do, value him higher than maybe some others. He's 23-year-old ruckman who was in a prelim final team, a very good team. So where does his value lie then, CD, and what's acceptable compensation should a club show interest?
Well, I think ultimately the market will determine that. We think that, as you say, he's a player who's contracted, who's the club has put a significant amount of development time into. We think he can. He's going to be a good player, whether it's at our club or at another club. So, from our perspective, we'd like to get as much as we can out of any potential deal. But at the same time, we also know that the market will determine as to what any player is actually worth. We've suggested at the moment that we'd like to get as much as we possibly can out of any deal for both Peter and Sam if it comes to it. But at the same time, I think the history of what we do would suggest that if there's a deal to be done, that we're open-minded to what it looks like.
And we'll wait and see on that. Now that you've got Finlayson, it's probably unlikely that he stays. That's just my view on it. We'll wait and see how it plays out. And Sam Palpepper, what's the interest been like in him, CD?
I think there's interest from a couple of places. Obviously, teams who are looking for that type of player who might be able to provide him with more midfield time than what we think he's going to get with our club. Again, that's not to say that we don't see Sam developing and continuing to get better, but each individual player has got to look at their own circumstances. So look, I'd be surprised right now. Put it this way, Kona, we're not thinking that either of those players is going to go, and that won't be a bad thing for our club. They're both people who we think are going to have a role to play, at our club next year. So for them to leave, we would need to be getting something that we think is going to be beneficial to the club, both in the short and long term.
Trade Radio is proudly supported by Host Plus, the official superannuation partner of the AFL. Having a top performer on your side, that's a plus.
This is general advice only. Consider the relevant Host Plus PDS available at hostplus.com.au before deciding if Host Plus is appropriate for you. For a description of the target market, please read the Target Market Determination, TMD, available at hostplus.com.au. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance.
The NBL's flying, I reckon. I reckon it's been one of the real positive growth sports of recent years. A key part of that is the NBL Commissioner, Jeremy LaLiga. He joins us right now. Jeremy, thanks so much for your time.
No, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, it's a new role, isn't it? Like the NBL Commissioner. It's very American. Adam Silver does that role in the NBA. We hear about Roger Goodell in the NFL. What's involved in being the NBL Commissioner? Can I ask?
Yeah, of course. And absolutely part of the intent was to make the position more relative and more relevant to our counterparts in the US. Obviously, basketball has a very strong roots in North America, and there's different vernacular around basketball clubs than, say, an AFL club. It's a distinction made between a GM and a CEO, for example, and at the league level, there's a distinction made between CEO and commissioner, and the commissioner role is more about the public-facing external stakeholder relations. So from our point of view here in Australia, that's dealing with Basketball Australia, the Players Association, FIBA, the world governing body, and then all of our government stakeholders, be it both state and federal, and in fact international. So we have a lot of stakeholders in other sporting leagues around the world, like the CBA in China and the NBA in the US are the two most obvious examples.
What's your role dealing with the owners of the NBL teams?
Yeah, we have it's a frequent and ongoing role at the moment, as it is with all of our executive and our executive chair as well, Larry Kesselman. We all meet with the owners reasonably frequently at present, and look, there's an ongoing dialogue there, trying to keep everyone as informed and up to date as we can regarding the status of the season and schedule, and negotiations with players' associations, and negotiations or instructions from FIBA regarding World Cup windows. So dialogue over the last, I would say, 18 months to 2 years has probably been more consistent than it's ever been during the recent history of the NBL, and certainly the last 6 seasons.
Can you perhaps share, obvious concerns clearly, but the season's expected to commence on November the 18th. Is it on track? Your dealings with government, borders, how it looks with crowds, vaccinate. There's so many things we've got to address. So firstly, is the season on track to start November the 18th?
Well, publicly at the moment, we're still saying November 18, but I think it would be very likely that it could push back ever so slightly. I don't think there's going to be any dramatic change from that November 18. Maybe as late as early December is probably the furthest that we would expect it to push back at this point. And that's just a matter of constantly reviewing the interaction between vaccination rates, venue availability, and state borders. Well, I was going to say opening and closing, but the runway towards state borders opening and closing, and indeed international borders. We've got obviously a team from New Zealand. They're a high priority for us because they were very significantly displaced last season, and we would prefer not to see a repeat of that again. But I think there will be a period of time that they will need to spend here in Australia. And then, of course, we've got a lot of players and staff who are either based overseas or who are returning from overseas, and getting them into the country at the moment with available flights and quotas of international arrivals is also pretty challenging. So it's basically a matching game, trying to sort all of those things up so that they align. And look, I would say that we're still on track for late November, early December.
All right. And every sport is a spectator sport, but none more so in the NBL. The crowds are what makes the experience what it is. What will your expectations be around crowds and capacity? What are you dealing with?
Yeah, look, our priority is very much putting fans first. So all of those other factors are all about making sure that we can deliver a fan-oriented experience, and that's both because the fans are the lifeblood of the sport, and they've been largely responsible for the renaissance of the sport in recent years, but also because they're absolutely fundamental to the sustainability of our clubs, and we've got to have bums on seats in order to pay the bills. We still don't have the luxury of being able to sit back and solely rely on media rights fees to put on games in empty stadiums. And while we've got the best media deal we've ever had coming into this season, it's still absolutely crucial to our clubs that we have fans there. So, look, from most reports, we're expecting healthy crowds in all of our relevant cities around the country at the beginning of the season. I think there will still be some restrictions, particularly in I guess Melbourne and Sydney are the most affected, but at the same time, they're also proving to be some of the quickest in terms of opening up. So I think we'll see pretty healthy crowds for most of or all of the season.
If you're an NBL fan who's unvaccinated, the prospect of unvaccinated people being allowed into stadiums, it's an issue that every sporting code in this country is dealing with right now. What's your policy going to be?
Yeah, look, I think we're not public policy makers to the extent that we're really just acting on the guidance of our state governments and the venues in which we play. We don't own or control those venues, and at the moment we're going to need to play with the hand that we're dealt. And certainly we've seen that start to emerge in a lot greater detail in recent weeks. And so we didn't think there was any point in us developing policy for it simply to be made redundant by states and venues regulating to either a greater or lesser extent after we publish it. So at the moment, our role is very much about compliance and education, both for fans and for players and staff. So from a fan's point of view, we'll let everyone know, although I'm sure they'll be relatively well informed themselves, but we'll keep updating all of our fans as to the different restrictions that apply in different cities and venues, but also there's a really significant education piece taking place with players in terms of ensuring that they know their responsibilities in terms of vaccinations in the various different states into which they're going to be travelling. And I suspect that will continue to change during the season as well. So it's going to be a bit of a moving feast, I would expect.
Jeremy LaLiga is the NBL Commissioner. He joins us this morning. So there's been a couple of roadblocks in terms of some players, and we're seeing it across all sporting codes across the world, but the Breakers star Taj Webster had his 2-year contract ripped up for refusing to be vaccinated, and there's some others as well that have questioned it. Unvaccinated players and your policy, will there be one, or once again will it be dictated to by state governments?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to be mandating vaccinations if that's sort of the crux of the question. And you refer to Ty Webster there at the Breakers. I wouldn't say that his contract was ripped up. It was about as mutual as it gets, in the sense that it was explained to Travis Trice in a similar situation at the Illawarra Hawks that if you choose not to get vaccinated, then the reality is it's looking like your opportunity to play away games is going to be very, very limited. And particularly for Ty, who was a player with the New Zealand Breakers, any prospect of being able to travel internationally during the course of the season, which I think is a real prospect sort of February onwards, would have been very, very limited for him. And a player of Ty's calibre, I don't think, wants to be sitting at home or watching his team on television for the majority of the season. And similarly, it doesn't add a huge amount for the Breakers. So I think he went with everyone's well wishes in the hope of being able to play somewhere that he doesn't need to be vaccinated in order to still be able to play a significant number of games. But we've seen the same in the NBA, right? And we've had a number of players over there who have changed their mind in recent times. I know a very high-profile player in Andrew Wiggins with the Golden State Warriors initially was saying that he wouldn't be vaccinated just for personal beliefs, not religious reasons or anything else along those lines. It was just based on his belief. And same sort of mature conversations were had with it. Well, that means there are going to be certain games that you're not going to be able to play, and he changed his mind. So I think all we can do is keep everyone informed and give them the opportunity to make decisions for themselves based on the regulatory environment we're all playing in.
Hey, Jeremy, a lot of texts coming through, which I'm sure you're happy to answer, about the NBL Cup. Is it going to be back this season?
I think the Cup was a fantastic asset for last season for two reasons. One, it was just a great opportunity to trial something new, but it was really purpose-driven for last season to ensure that we had a significant number of games played in a short amount of time to give us a bit of an insurance buffer in case the season was called off early if COVID happened to get significantly worse. So it was built for purpose for last season with a mindset to continuing it in future. However, having said that, because of the delayed start to this season, I think we would be trying to put a round peg into a square hole if we were to try and do it again this season. It's definitely on the to-do list for future seasons. We're not yet entirely sure what format it will take because it was very bespoke last season to particular circumstances, but I think trying to get it away, an additional 36 games again this season, would probably be a little bit overly ambitious.
Okay, there you have it. So unlikely to go ahead again this year, but not off the table in future years. And just a quick thought before we let you go. The Jack Jumpers, I mean, how are we progressing ahead of season one and in the NBL expansion?
They're absolutely flying. They've got a good, strong roster. They've got a fantastic supporter base now. The membership numbers are travelling very, very strongly in the right direction. And I think, pleasingly, one of the linings, I guess, one of the silver linings of the cloud of having to delay the season a little bit is that the venue will be well and truly ready on time. And I can tell you that was causing some sleepless nights. So with all the impact of COVID delaying the ability of Labor to actually get on site. So, look, very pleased that they're going to be rip-raring ready to go come game one of the season.
Preparing Mars Shuttle 1. We have liftoff in 3, 2,
Houston,
1.
permission to abort.
Shuttle 1, is there a problem?
Well, it's just, we're still alive in the quaddie here.
Why didn't you say anything?
The first two legs are the faves, so we didn't want to make a big deal, you know?
10-4, launch delayed.
Introducing Sportsbet's new Bet with Mates. Start your group, bet together and share the moment. Conditions apply. Gamble responsibly. 1-800-858-858.
4 minutes after 10 o'clock, Riley Beveridge in the studio. Thanks for stopping by again.
G'day, Kane. Looks like today might be the day where everything happens. It's getting very busy in the trade landscape.
Well, all those wet blankets out there, Riley, I read reports in The Age and the Herald Sun, and those that don't get a gig during trade time, talking the trade period down. It's all happening. It is all happening. There's plenty going on.
Yes, there is. So it looks like this morning, Collingwood, as Cal Toomey, our colleague at afl.com.au, is reporting that Collingwood's set to move pick 22 to Fremantle for pick 27 and a future third-round pick. So there's been a few reports this morning that Gold Coast could unlock the trade period with that Will Brodie deal. It looks like this is actually the move that's going to unlock the trade period. So I think Fremantle will bank pick 19 and pick 22 that they'll get from Collingwood will be the one they shift to Geelong for Jordan Clark. That's what's looking more likely at the moment. And then that opens up the door for Adam Cerra to move to Carlton as well.
Right. Okay. So there's all things happening. Dominoes are falling everywhere. So I had Peter Rode on Trade Radio this morning. Now, he manages Lewis Young. He said that'll be done today. And he also there was just a little gold nugget in there as well, because we're sort of looking, what satisfies the Bulldogs. He suggested that he was pick 40 something and his value was about that mark. So watch Sam Petrevski-Seton as well. Maybe can unlock the Lewis Young deal. So Petrevski-Seton too. Of course, West Coast, the Blues will get that pick back. That may then go to the Bulldogs for Lewis Young. So that's one that he expected to be done today. So good get for the Blues, you think?
Yeah, look, they needed versatile key position depth. That was on their radar and pretty high on their agenda going into this year's trade period. There's a bit of talk around Jared Brander. My mail was that Brander was never really on their radar. I get how it could have been a quick fix to the Sam Petrevski-Seton deal, but Lewis Young was always their priority in terms of getting that key defensive depth through the door. So I like him. I think he can play a variety of different roles. He played forward a little bit for the Dogs, started his career back. He played 2 finals as a ruckman this year as well. So the Blues bring in someone with a pretty bright future and someone that I think will probably start in their best 22 next year in that key defensive role.
What did you make of Will Brodie and where it's at? I mean, it's got to be a blow for Gold Coast again, doesn't it? And another top 10 or high draft pick walks out the door and you don't get a whole lot in return.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I followed his career pretty closely. He was a top 10 pick all those years ago, and he just looked like he had all the makings of a talented 200-game player. It hasn't eventuated for him at Gold Coast. He gets a fresh opportunity at Fremantle, and you can only hope that he can take his chance there. Because I've even said it a couple of times at AFL level where you watch him and you think, yeah, everything's there. The tools are there. He's got all the tools to sort of become a good player. He just hasn't been able to put it together on a consistent basis. So it's almost a free hit for Fremantle. They get pick 19 with the deal as well. So it's a no-brainer for them to get this deal over the line, and they absorb his contract for 2022 while they're at it, which they're in a position they can do that. The way it was described to me last night was that the contract that they'd sort of set aside and the money in the cap that they'd set aside for Adam Cerra, should he have re-signed at Fremantle for next year and beyond, is basically now being taken up by Jordan Clark and Will Brodie. So they haven't actually lost out in those deals. They've got 2 players in the door for what they assumed would be Adam Cerra. So it's a good deal for Fremantle, a real no-brainer for them, and they'll get pick 22, as we mentioned, from Collingwood in exchange for pick 27 and a future third. That'll then likely get sent to Geelong, and they'll get Jordan Clark through the door as well, another player with heaps of potential and one that hasn't necessarily been able to put it all together at his former club, but one that'll get the chance to do that at the Dockers. Yeah,
don't mind it from Fremantle. So you lose Cerra, but you get Will Brodie, you get pick 8 in the draft, and you get Jordan Clark. Like it's not a complete disaster with where it's at. A few questions coming through. This one from Melissa to you, Riley. Why isn't Richmond doing more? I thought they were going to try and trade picks to get higher in the draft.
They're trying. They're trying to do more. They're trying to get as high as they possibly can in the draft. As it stands, they've got 7 picks inside the top 47 at the moment. They can't use all of those selections, so they have to bundle a couple together and move up higher. So we're still expecting them to do that. We're still expecting them to try as hard as they can to do that. And the beauty of this is that they don't have to do that before next Wednesday's trade period deadline. You can, of course, now trade picks all the way through until the November draft or late November draft. You can also trade picks live on the night. So don't be surprised if between now and the next 8 weeks when the draft falls, 6 weeks when the draft falls, Richmond does a couple of little pick swaps as well.
All right, and a few more questions we'll get through whilst we've got you here, Riley. Can you ask about Ben Long and Jack Loney? I've had a couple of questions on this recently. This one comes from Tom, who's clearly interested at the Saints.
Not much love for either at the moment. I mean, Jack Loney's a good player that's... I think he had a game this year where he kicked a few goals. He kicked 3 goals. I think it might have been against Carlton. But he's a player that's sort of... He's shown that he can play at this level, but just no clubs seem to be takers at the moment. I wonder if that changes, if they can find a way to pick him up as a delisted free agent, not have to pay any draft picks for him, potentially put some people on a rookie list summer as well. As for Ben Long, I don't see any takers for him at the moment, but his situation's different in that he's contracted. So he can always walk back to St Kilda in 2022 and try and establish himself as a best 22 player.
All right. Any love for Jared Brander, says AG?
Not at the moment. So we reported on afl.com.au last night that Jared Brander is more than willing to go back to West Coast if that opens up at the end of this year. So he's uncontracted, hasn't been offered anything yet, and the Eagles are happy for him to explore his opportunities. And if he can find somewhere that is willing to give him a home, they'll be willing to negotiate a trade with that club. At the moment, a club hasn't really presented itself too firmly for Jared Brander, but West Coast is more than open to him coming back in 2022. I think Brander's more than open to him going back there in 2022, so I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. He's too good a player to not have a home next year, so I expect him to still be on an AFL list in 2022.
AFL.com.au's Riley Beveridge. You'll hear him on Trade Exchange from midday on Trade Radio, AFL platforms with Cow Toomey. And this is the update for Tyre Power, number 1 on the trade table. Is it true, Riley, that Tim O'Brien will go to the Bulldogs now that Lewis Young is on his way to the Blues, probably by the end of today?
Yes, looking likely that he'll join as a free agent on a 2-year deal. He'll get the opportunity there to re-establish himself, probably as a permanent defender. That's what we're being told. That it looks like they're targeting him here as that intercept defender down back to be that automatic replacement for Lewis Young. I actually like it. I think it's a good trade for the Western Bulldogs. I think he's shown some good things down back when he's played there for Hawthorn this year. Didn't necessarily work out for him as a forward. We got Hawks recruiting boss Mark McKenzie on the show today on Trade Radio from 12 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So tune in there and we'll get more answers from him at 12.
Nice. Just on that, let's head up to Perth and speak to Nick, or head over to Perth. You want to speak about that deal, Nick, with the Bulldogs and Tim O'Brien. You're speaking to Riley Beveridge.
Yeah, well, Riley just basically answered my question there. And I'll ask you as well, Kane, what do you think about the deal?
I don't hate it. I mean, you're not giving up. You're not giving up anything to get him. So that's where you're not losing out of the draft. You're certainly adding some depth to that area. He's a player that has extreme talent, and I think what some players are after at that stage in their career is certainty. Like here's the role that you're going to play. You're going to spend all pre-season there. You're going to go to the defensive meetings. You're not going to go to forwards one week, then defenders the next week, and lose any continuity with your footy. So if they can sell that to him, if they can train him up to play that role, and they can give him some certainty about his position, then I don't like it. And he's 28 years of age now, so he's got to absolutely make the most of every opportunity he gets, and it's probably time for a second opportunity, which I don't mind. Hey, Riley, I was just thinking about Jordan Dawson and Adelaide. This one is the one that seems to be going to take the longest or go down to the wire. What's your best guess at how this happens? Of course, Adelaide were involved in that mega 4-club pick swap yesterday. Does that help them? I personally can't see how. Have you got a theory?
Well, you can look at it two ways, Kane. They shifted out their second-round selection this year, which meant the gap between their first and their second pick this year widened, which meant that there was no easy and sort of noticeable resolution there for this year's picks. But in that 4-club trade, they got Melbourne's future first-rounder next year. So do they offer that thinking that at the moment it looks like that'll be in the 15 to 20 range, given Melbourne probably goes into next season as one of the premiership favourites? I mean, I think that's the obvious solution, and they say, look, it's probably going to be picking the 15 to 20s. Let's hand that over. That's the resolution. Of course, though, there's another element to that you need to add on, and that's the fact that there's a lot of high-quality, uncontracted South Australian talent that I expect both Adelaide and Port Adelaide to be trying to lure at the end of next year, most notably Jack Lukosius and Isaac Rankin at Gold Coast. So do they want to keep and bank picks for next year, knowing that they could have a shot at getting one of them back through the doors into South Australia? It's going to be complicated. And you know what? For all the neutrals out there, probably thank God for that, because, I mean, it looks like if everything happens today, it could be the one that keeps our attention on next Wednesday's deadline.
Absolutely. Jimmy's on the line. You want to speak about outgoing Richmond forward Callum Coleman-Jones, Jimmy?
G'day, boys. Just in terms of North Melbourne, so surely that Cherry deal can't go through unless CCJ gets announced or that deal gets done. I was just going to say, is there any chance that North could lose him in the preseason draft if he does walk there, or do we have a first pick that can snap him up? How does that work?
Is this for CCJ or for Cherry?
Yeah, for CCJ. If we can't do a deal with Richmond and he goes to the pre-season draft, is there anyone that can jump us to securing services?
No. So North Melbourne has pick one in the pre-season draft and he's uncontracted. So that's the leverage in trade talks with Richmond at the moment, that if they can't get a deal done for Cal Coleman-Jones in the trade period, they can walk him to the pre-season draft and pick him up without anyone interfering there. Of course, the Kangaroos, though, are working in good faith with the Tigers at the moment. Both clubs are talking through deals about that in the last couple of days. We reported on AFL.com.au last night that I think the latest offer was North Melbourne had offered a future third rounder and Robbie Tarrant for Cal Coleman-Jones and a future fourth rounder. So there was a few reports earlier this week that it was just the future third, a slide back from the future third to the future fourth for Coleman-Jones. That actually included Robbie Tarrant as well. So they're working in good faith. They're working through packages that involves both Robbie Tarrant and Coleman-Jones, and I think a deal will get done by Wednesday.
On the other side of this, something extraordinary happened in my personal life yesterday. It's not related to sport. We'll reveal that, and I'm going to ask you your opinion on how I address it. Get involved. 1300 736 736. There's a lot of things we've got to talk about. It's 26 minutes after 9 o'clock. You can jump on and join in on 1300 736 736. Off the temper text, 043398 1116. A couple of you having a crack at what may be up with my personal issue. This one from Wazza says, you got over your fear of fire? No, I haven't got over that yet, Wazza. It was a good guess. And another person suggested I've had ongoing issues with the coffee machine. It's not that. Coffee machine's working brilliantly, and it's more serious than that. So we'll reveal that in a second after we get to Matt in Adelaide, who wants to chat about Toby Green, who has his appeal hearing today, Matt, at 10 o'clock. How many is fair for Toby, and what do you think will happen?
Oh, it sounds like probably 6 is going to eventuate, but I think what doesn't get mentioned, or I haven't heard mentioned as probably as much as it should be, is doesn't 6 games take him to 14 total, which then leaves him 2 games away from a life ban or being deregistered for having 16 games total? Isn't that the rule?
I think you'll find that's the rule at amateur level. I'm more than happy to be corrected on that. I don't think that rule applies in the AFL. I think that is more of an amateur level rule. But once again, 043398 1116, I'm happy to be corrected for that. But I mean, there's been some talk about Toby and his place in the Australian Football Hall of Fame, and will this affect all of that? So, yeah, I mean, his behaviour is always topical, but I don't think that comes into the equation. I'm happy to be wrong, as I said. Jack's in Geelong. Who's going to challenge for the flag next year, Jack?
Yeah, Kane, I think you're a bit hard on Brisbane, saying that they're sitting on their hands and doing nothing. I remember a few years ago, Port Adelaide brought in Motlop, Rockcliffe and Watts, and everybody said, oh, geez, Port Adelaide have won the trade period. But what Port Adelaide did was they brought in Rosie, Butters and Dersma. Now, I can tell you what three had a bigger impact on Port Adelaide. They brought in youth, exuberance, run, and that transformed their entire team. What happens in the next 6 days may not look like the clubs are doing a lot, but they might do something in 6 weeks' time that might change their team, even in the short term.
Possibly. I think you can do both. I think the names you mentioned at Port Adelaide, they didn't give up anything to get them. So they Motlop, maybe a second round. The others were probably free agents that they got for nothing, and they didn't neglect the draft. So they did both. And they made, I don't think it was a disaster. Jack Watts didn't work. The others were okay for them. but they were having a crack at doing it. So we'll wait and see, but you could be right. I just think with the issues that Brisbane have with injuries and their key position stocks and maybe an issue in the ruck and how close they have got the last couple of years, I'd love to see them try and bolster their list. So anyway, I have a younger half-sister. And she sent me a screenshot the other day and she said, "Oh my God, I'm telling Lucy," that's my wife Lucy, "that you are on Tinder." I said, "You're kidding, aren't you?" So she sent through screenshots of me. This is legit. If you're on Tinder, you can look me up. So apparently I'm on Tinder. Now, I just want to put it out there that this wasn't me that signed up to, the singles app Tinder. I've never, hand on heart, been on Tinder. I've never intended to be. I'm more than happily married to my wife, who we started dating when I was 15. I am not on Tinder. So if any of you dirty birds out there and you singles are on Tinder and you come across me, it isn't me. It's some idiot that has set up a Tinder profile of myself. And I'm a bit distressed about this. It's not good for the image. It's not good for the brand. And there's not a lot I can do about it. So what are my options here? 1300 736 736, or you can send me a text, 043398 1116. What are my rights? And can I report this? Can I get it removed? And is this not a good look for the image? Kane Corns, it says, 36. That's nice. They got my age wrong. It says I work for Australian Film and Television and Radio. And there's one shot of me which was taken from my holidays 3 or 4 years ago with no shirt on and some board shorts. And there's another picture of me in a running singlet in the middle of a 5K running race, which I did here in South Australia, which they've swiped off my Instagram. So I just want to put it out there. Lucy, my beautiful wife, to everyone else listening who's questioning my morals right now, it is not me on Twitter, and someone has violated my rights and set up a Twitter profile. I actually find it a little bit funny, half funny, but what do I do to get this removed? Let me know your thoughts. Has anyone experienced something similar? And the other question is, would you swipe right or left?
Trade Radio is proudly supported by Host Plus, the official superannuation partner of the AFL. Having a top performer on your side, that's a plus.
This is general advice only. Consider the relevant Host Plus PDS available at hostplus.com.au before deciding if Host Plus is appropriate for you. For a description of the target market, please read the Target Market Determination, TMD, available at hostplus.com.au. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance.